In lesson 2.1, we talked about qualitative data. In this lesson, we'll talk about quantitative data. So if you recall, in the last lesson, we learned how to create pie charts, bar graphs, and Pareto charts. We will learn for quantitative data how to make histograms, dot plots, and time series. Recall, quantitative data is something that's measurable or countable. So we're now on this left side. The objectives for this lesson is to organize discrete and continuous data in tables. Recall that discrete is the countable and finite. Continuous is something that's infinite. Construct histograms for discrete and continuous data, and draw dot plots, and then identify the shape of a distribution. A common graphical display for quantitative data is a histogram. So a histogram histograms are bar charts for quantitative data. We're going to refer to some of the key features of a histogram below. But before, let's look at dot plot. A dot plot is just a type of a histogram. Some key features of a histogram. They're going to have the same features of the bar graph on page 2, except that the bars do touch and the order will matter since we're working with numbers. So since the order matters, we can describe the shape, and we will get into that later on in this lesson. The data is going to be grouped into classes. There's going to be a width of a class or bin. And when you're doing your homework or test problem, you're going to choose the starting value in the class or bin width that matched the problem. And when creating your own histogram, you're going to choose a convenient starting value and class width. So let's look at the steps involved to make a frequency distribution for quantitative data. You're going to first want to compute the class width or the bin width. You do this by taking the largest data value, subtracting it from the smallest. Then divide by the number of classes that you have or want. You're going to round it to the following. So if you're working with whole numbers, you're going to round up to the next whole number. If you're working to numbers to the 10th, you're going to round up to the next 10th number, and so on. Then you're going to compute the lowest class boundary. The lowest class boundary is computed as follows. You're going to take the smallest value in the data set and subtract 0.5 if you're working with whole numbers, 0.05 if you're working with tenths, and 0.005 if you're working to the hundredths. So basically, if you're working to the nearest whole number, you want to subtract that half of below it. So you're no longer working with whole numbers, you're working with numbers below it. That'll make more sense once we get into this. Then you're going to create your classes. You're going to start with your lowest boundary that you just found, and then you're going to add your class width to it from step 1 to get your lower class boundary for the next class. You're going to keep repeating this until you get all the classes. Then you're going to fill in the upper class boundaries. The upper class boundary for the first class will be the lower class boundary of the second, and so on. And then 4, to figure out the number of data points that fall into each class, you're going to go through the data values and then see which class boundaries it is between. You're going to use tally marks to figure out the data values. The frequency for a class is the number of data values that fall in the class. So let's look at an example, because that's hard to actually put into place when it's just words. If you need more help after this example, feel free to watch this video. The table below contains amount of rent paid every month for 24 students from a statistics course. Make a relative frequency distribution using 7 classes. So right away you should be thinking of or seeing the relative frequency. Here's your data. You want to identify the variable and type of variable. So what are we looking at? The variable is the amount of monthly rent. Now, is that quantitative or qualitative? That's a quantitative variable because we're talking about money here. Money is quantitative. It is countable. So that leads us, is it discrete or continuous? If you look at your overview sheet, is it something countable or is it something you would measure? Money is something that you count, so that's discrete. We're going to compute the class width. So these are the steps from up here. So let's first copy our data into a fresh Google Sheets document and then paste it. So this is going to be handy for you to know how to do. So all I did was highlight the data and I did Control-C, or you can right-click, copy. You can then paste special, and I would do values, or Control-Shift-V. So here, you want it all to be in a column, one column. So you're going to cut these and put them down here. So on your keyboard, Control-X, and then Control-V. Or you can right-click, cut, and then paste, Control-X, Control-V. As you get more practice with it, this will become second nature to you. So we have one column. Again, we should sort it. We have our largest is 2,550 and the smallest is 350. So the class width is largest minus smallest. So let's set that up. So 2,550 minus the 350 over the number of classes. And it tells us we want to use 7 classes. So you want to subtract these first. You get 2,200. Then divide by 7. So you get about 314.286. So the data are whole numbers, so you want to round up to the next whole number, no matter what it is. So this is going to round up to 315. That's your class width. Compute the lowest class boundary. You're going to take the smallest data. You're working with whole numbers, so you're going to subtract 0.5. So you're going to take 350, that's your smallest data, and subtract 0.5. So you have 349.5. That's going to be your lowest class boundary. So 349.5 will go right here. Step 3, create the classes. So you're going to start with your lowest class boundary, then you're going to add the class width to get the next lower class boundary. So you're going to take 349.5 and add 315. You get 664.5. Add 315 again, 979.5. Keep adding 315, and you should get the following. Make sure you try to do these on your own because practice is good. Those are your lower boundaries. So you repeated that till you got all the classes. Now, for the upper class boundaries, for the first class, it's just going to be the lower class boundary of the second. So this is your lower. The next number will be your upper. So do 664.5 goes here. And then the next lower is that upper. So you just copy that number over. And then here you could just add 315 to it to get the two 1,554.5. Okay, now we're going to do tallies. So you could just go through these as is. 1,500 is between these numbers, so per tally in, and so on. So 1,350 is between those numbers. 350 is there. 1,200 is in this class. 850 is in the second class. 900, second class. Okay, so pause the video, and you should get 4 numbers that fall between the first class, 8 that fall in the second, 5 in the third, 6 in the fourth class, 0, 0, and then 1. So you're just going to make those tallies into numbers. So we have 4, 8, 5, 6, 0, 0, and 1. You can total those up, you get 24. Right, because we're tally and find the frequency. So the relative is just your frequency divided by the total. So 4 divided by 24, 0.17. 8 divided by 24 is 0.33. 5 divided by 24 is 0.21. 6 divided by 24 is 0.25. 0, 0, and 1 divided by 24 is 0.04. Go ahead, add those up. You should get 1. Now in your homework, it's going to ask you for class width. The upper and lowers can be calculated different ways. Do you see how no matter what number here it is, it's never going to be like 0.5? That's why we did step 2 and subtracted it and made it from a whole to a decimal. So none of these land on an upper or lower value. Now, in other books, they do it differently. So to compensate for that, or to take that into consideration, when you do the class width, you just take 2 lower values and subtract them. And you're going to get the 315. So you take 664.5 minus 349.5, equaling 315. That would be your class width. If you had a table like this, that's how you could figure it out. Always use the lowers. Don't go from lower to upper. It would work in this case, but like I said, in other books it will not. So I would just follow this formula.